When going through a digital transformation, there's a lot of work that needs to be done from a business process perspective, defining your current state and ultimately defining your future state. But which business processes should we focus on when we're documenting them? That's what I want to talk about here today. My name is Eric Kimberling. I'm the CEO of Third Stage Consulting. We're an independent consulting firm that helps clients throughout the world reach their third stage of digital transformation success. And one of the key fundamental inputs into a successful digital transformation is clearly defined business processes and business requirements. And not just any business processes, but your future state optimized business processes. And this is the step in the process that a lot of organizations trip up on or get confused by or don't know how to handle during a digital transformation. Now, in today's video, I'm not going to dive into how to do business process management, although I have produced videos that cover this in more detail. In fact, if you check this video right here, this one gives you an overview of business process mapping and how to go about the process. But what I want to do today is not talk about the logistics of how to do business process mapping, but talk about when you know how you're going to do business process mapping, which business processes should you focus on. Now, it's important to clarify the ones that are most important because those are the ones you really want to go deep into. And other business processes, not to say they're not important, but you may not want to spend as much time documenting them because they're not things that are going to make or break your digital transformation. So what we'll do today is dive into those top business processes that are most important for you to document. And I'll also cover at the end of this video the business processes that you don't want to worry about documenting. So be sure to stick around till the end. Now, one disclaimer or thing to note before we jump in here is that all of these business processes will probably need to be documented at some point. Any business process that you have within your organization, you want to document to some degree. The question, though, becomes, when do you document it? How important is it for you to document early in the digital transformation? And the second part of it is, how deep do you go? How much detail do you want to get into? So every process within your organization will eventually need to be documented, but maybe not right away and maybe not in super detail. So what I'm going to talk about as I'm going through this are those processes that are so important that you're going to want to document them early and you're going to want to document them in great detail, ideally before you've even selected the software, let alone starting to implement them. Before we dive too far into today's content, I want to invite you to learn a little bit more about Third Stage Consulting, who we are and what we do. I've included a link to a video right here that describes Third Stage in a bit more detail. It talks about our story, our history, our philosophy, our clients, our service offerings, and that sort of thing. But in general, what Third Stage Consulting does is we're an independent and tech-agnostic consulting provider. We help clients through their entire digital transformation life cycles, beginning with digital strategy, software evaluation and selection, all the way through and including implementation planning, implementation readiness, and the actual implementation itself. We're technology agnostic, so we only represent our clients' best interests. We do not represent software vendors. But having said that, we work very closely with software vendors, all the leading players that you can imagine we've worked with, both in helping clients evaluate and select them, but also in helping clients implement those solutions as well. So we have a very broad, objective, agnostic view of the market that is meant to really represent your interest as you go through your digital transformation. I also encourage you to scan this QR code right here to get access to our resource center. This resource center has a ton of information, a ton of ebooks that are free. You have access to top 10 software rankings, playbooks for how to make your project more successful, guides to change management, YouTube videos, all kinds of stuff that are going to help you through your digital transformation. So I encourage you to scan this QR code to get access to those resources. And please feel free to reach out to me directly to brainstorm ideas about your project. Even if it's just informally, you want to bounce around some ideas and get some informal advice, I'd be happy to spend some time with you. So feel free to reach out to me. I've included my contact information below. You can also find it in the description field of this video as well. Order entry is a critical business process for two reasons. One is because it's a customer-facing business process that allows you to capture what the customer wants. And secondly, because the order entry or the capturing of the order is typically what spawns and feeds into a number of downstream business processes. So order entry is a really critical business process that's really important, especially if you're a manufacturing organization, if you have a complex product or a complex offering. Order entry becomes even more important because the better you capture data on the front end of that order entry, the better your downstream processes are going to work. And just as importantly, when you're going through a digital transformation, the information you capture in the order entry can oftentimes create problems later on downstream. So it's really important that you have a clear understanding of the information that you need to capture, how you engage with your customers and capture the needs and wants of that customer, and ultimately how you capture that information in the system so that then we can map how that information flows downstream throughout the rest of your supply chain. Similar to order entry is another business process that's around configuring, pricing, and quoting a product. And it may sound like it's the same thing as order entry, but it's a little bit different because order entry is more of a finalized entry of an order into a system, but configure, price, quote is a way to put some logic behind how you can or how you cannot configure a product or service that you have to offer. So in other words, it's a way to automate and to put business rules in place within the technology so that it won't allow people to mix and match different components or different pieces of your product or service that don't necessarily fit together logistically. So the configure, price, and quote functionality is something that's really important from that perspective, but also because a lot of systems don't do configuring, pricing, and quoting very well. And if they don't do it very well, it may be a problem for your overall digital transformation. So this is a business process that you're typically going to want to do early on, even before you select the software. And certainly when it comes time to design and deploy the software, you want to go even deeper into that area to make sure you've really fully documented this process as well as tested it and trained people on how that new process will work. If you're a manufacturing organization, your manufacturing processes are going to be critical to document as part of your digital transformation. Reason being, there's probably some sort of secret sauce or something unique to the product you're building that could break an ERP system or any other technology that can't handle that functionality. So this is a process you want to document in detail and have a lot of clarity on up front so that you can select the software that best fits your manufacturing and shop floor needs, and ultimately so that you can implement the software in a way that's going to support those processes. Now, some organizations will say, well, we're not going to change our business processes in the manufacturing and shop floor. We're going to use a separate MES system or some other sort of shop floor automation, and it's going to integrate back to our core ERP or digital transformation technology. That's fine if you do that, but you still have to make sure that that data flows back and that you have a clear business process for how that data will flow back to other systems. Because again, even if you're not automating that part of your business as part of this digital transformation, the data flow and interaction between your core back office system and your manufacturing and shop floor technologies are going to be critical to your operations. So you want to make sure you select and implement the software that can handle that the best. Now, a final thing I'll mention here is this process is so important because there's so many different manufacturing strategies that organizations have. Some manufacturers are producing low dollar, high volume type products where efficiency is the most important thing. Other more extreme examples might be a manufacturer that produces low volume, high dollar, highly configurable products and services. And those are two very different models, two very different processes, two very different sets of needs and ways you would deploy technology. So for those reasons too, you want to make sure you fully capture what the needs are, what your business processes are within your manufacturing and shop floor. The pick, pack, and ship process is the core fundamental aspect of warehouse management. So if you think about picking off of a shelf, packing it into a box or into a container, and then shipping it to your customer. That's what happens within a warehouse. And warehouse strategies differ from organization to organization. Some are focused on just-in-time inventory management, where it's coming straight off the production floor, out the door, onto a truck. Other organizations are make to stock, so they'll stock the goods in a warehouse and then they'll pick, pack, and ship it from there. So you want to have these business processes clearly documented. So again, you can choose and implement the software that's going to best enable that. And not every software does these different nuances within your warehouse management equally. And so therefore you want to make sure that you have fully tested and vetted the ability of the software to handle some of your unique pick, pack, and ship processes. It's always fascinating to me how many organizations implement new technologies. They get the processes worked out, they get the system stabilized, it's operational, it's working great, but executives and other stakeholders in the organization can't get the data they need out of the system. They don't have the right reporting, they don't have the right analytics, they don't have the right business intelligence tools or needs laid out. So it's really important that as part of your implementation, you look at what are those reports that are critical to our operations. What do the executives need to see? What does mid-level management need to see? What does the average frontline worker need to see to be able to do their job effectively? What are the dashboards they need to look at in real time? Those are all things that are outputs out of the system that you have to clearly define so that you don't forget about that during an implementation. And even if we back up even further, we want to make sure we have a technology stack that allows us to create those capabilities. In other words, we want to vet that the software can actually create the report that we need or the analytics we need. Once we've identified the software can do it, then we want to deploy it in a way that actually results in those business requirements. So analytics and reporting is something that should not be an afterthought. It should be treated as any other really important business process, because otherwise you just have a technology in place with the data sitting there, but no one can make sense of it. Depending on which part of the world you're going to have different regulatory requirements. Authorities in your local markets are going to tell you how you have to report certain things or how certain business processes might work. If you look at highly regulated industries like pharmaceutical, life sciences, energy and utilities, certainly government entities, there's a lot of restrictions on how business processes can and can't work. There's also a lot of regulatory reporting requirements that vary from country to country. So you want to make sure, again, that you have software that has that regulatory requirements covered and captured within their functionality. And if you're a multinational organization, you want to make sure that you've really looked into all these different nuances and needs at the different local levels throughout your implementation. And one of the biggest challenges we see with global digital transformations is the fact that the core centralized project team doesn't take into consideration some of those regulatory requirements. So it's very important to understand what they are, that you map out those processes, that when you're looking at the different locations or different parts of the world and what their needs are, that you clearly map out what those regulatory processes are so that you don't overlook them, because obviously that can be very costly long term if you don't capture those in your digital transformation. Now, I've covered a lot of business processes that generally you want to spend a lot of time on and make sure you focus on during an implementation. However, there might be other ones that are really important to you. They're part of your secret sauce. It's part of your competitive advantage. They're sort of the showstoppers or deal breakers, things that you're not willing to change just because your technology may or may not be able to handle that capability. So any business process that you materially want to change and any business process that's a core part of your competitive advantage, those business processes you want to document as well. And again, some of them I may have already talked about in this video, but there may be other processes that I haven't talked about that are very important to you that you want to capture. So if it is something that's going to be a big change to your organization or it's a big competitive advantage, be sure to document those business processes early and upfront. Now let's talk about the business processes that you probably don't need to spend a lot of time documenting, especially early in a project. In general, if I were to summarize, I'd say those vanilla business processes that are common to your competitors, they're common in other industries, and they're not really a unique differentiator to you and your organization. It's not a source of competitive advantage. You probably don't want to spend a ton of time documenting those processes, especially in the evaluation phase of new technology. So for example, accounting processes and GL processes, some basic period end close processes, accounts payable processing, accounts receivable. Those are good examples of things that probably aren't core competitive differentiators. They're things that are important. You have to do those things, but you can probably defer to whatever the technology can or can't do, and you'll probably be okay. You're probably not going to bring the operations to its knees. So you want to look at those vanilla processes that, yes, you need to make sure you deploy the software effectively and that you have clearly defined processes when you get to the implementation, but you don't need to spend a ton of time recreating the wheel and trying to redefine how that process should look when your technology can probably handle that process just fine out of the box. Now, one thing to note is even on these lower priority business processes, you're still going to have to document them at some point. You still need to have a blueprint for how you're going to deploy technology and how you're going to train people, test the software, all that stuff. So you do need to document it, but you're probably just not going to spend a ton of time getting consensus and alignment and spending time on documentation and going really deep into those processes. You might just stay at a higher level to ensure that you can test the software and train the people on the new processes rather than going super deep into it. So I hope this has given you some guidance and some direction on how to handle business processes and how to treat them differently, how to prioritize them, which ones you should and shouldn't focus a lot of your time on documenting, because after all, we do have limited resources and we can't recreate the wheel or boil the ocean as part of our digital transformation. So hopefully this has given you some good tips. For more tips on how to make your transformation successful, I encourage you to read our ebook called Lessons from 1000 Digital Transformations. This book contains a number of lessons and best practices that we have from having helped over 1,000 clients through their digital transformation journeys. And we cover business process management as one of the threads within that, but we also talk about change management and program management, architecture and data integration and other things that are going to make your project successful. So you can read that paper for free by scanning the QR code here, or you can go to the description field below and access it via the link. So I hope you found this information useful and hope you have a great day. Let alone, starting. And they're not really a unique management, although I have talked about it before. Now let's talk about the business processes that you should. Wow.